Hello and welcome to David's Politics Show. 3 weeks have passed since the dramatic events of the 7th of October. Israel has been on a war footing for some time now, and the situation in the region is tense and volatile. As of the time of this recording, Sunday the 29th of October in the afternoon, the expected main ground thrust into Gaza has not yet happened, although more limited raids and incursions by the IDF have taken place. With me to discuss the military and political aspects of the crisis is Amatzia Baram, Professor Emeritus at the University of Haifa. Professor Baram has taught at the Hebrew University, at Tel Aviv University, and at Georgetown in Washington, D.C. He is a noted Iraq expert. His latest book is titled Saddam Hussein and Islam, Ba'ath Iraq, From Secularism to Faith, published by the Woodrow Wilson Center and Johns Hopkins University Press in 2014. Professor Baram, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
My pleasure and honor. Thank you.
So let me begin by kind of asking you to give us your thoughts on how to kind of conceptualize what happened on October 7. We're already referring to it by the date, kind of like 9/11. Clearly, it was a massive failure on multiple fronts, and people are kind of throwing around the phrase intelligence failure, but it seems to me that is a bit vague. It doesn't necessarily capture exactly what transpired. What kind of failure was it? Was it a failure of collection, of analysis? Was it a failure at the more kind of at the political state level? Kind of give us your thoughts on how we got here.
Well, it definitely was a colossal intelligence failure. Very much like what happened to us on October 6, 1973, the Yom Kippur War.
Mm-hmm.
Both Anwar Sadat and the Hamas leadership managed to lull us into complacency, and they managed amazingly and brilliantly to inject into our veins opium. We were in deep slumber. Worse, we were having opium visions of Hamas deterred, Hamas, me included. Shouldn't be the case, but it was. But I am not now today, I used to be, but today I'm no longer advising officially our intelligence system. And that Hamas is deterred, that Hamas has changed its spots, even more so. It changed its spots. It's now interested in high employment of Gaza people in Israel, which was the case, 17,000 people every day. High salaries paid to these people. They were paid the regular Israeli salaries without income tax. We were not charging them income tax. So they were paid slightly higher salaries than the average Israeli worker. They were interested in technology, in development, in the well-being of their people. And because you must understand, people tend to see other people as thinking their way, their own way. So I fell into the same trap. But I can say about myself only one thing. Unlike many Israeli analysts who specialized, civilian analysts, historians, who specialized in Hamas, I never did. I was just an Israeli citizen. I specialized in Hezbollah.
Right.
And if I make a mistake there,
right.
Mea culpa.
Yeah, sure.
The way it's happened, I'm also guilty, because I never came up and said, guys, you are hallucinating. This is absolutely nonsense. They are Islamist radicalists who are going to slash your throat in 5 minutes. You cannot trust these guys. I should have said it because this is how I look at Hezbollah, but not Hamas. I didn't bother. Point is, all the 99% of the Israeli political analysts, Middle East analysts, Arabists, Islamic students of contemporary Islam, military intelligence, political elite, both left, right, and center, had the same idea. Hamas is not just deterred. Yes, some said just deterred, but many others felt, and said it in various ways, Hamas seems to be moderating. Mm-hmm. That was the overall conceptual, pipe dream or hallucination we were having. Then you had the practical things, the shorter term things, which of course were different left and right, and in the military, the different story altogether. But you had the left felt that it is a good thing, the left and center. It's a good thing to help Gaza people by employment, by sending them a lot of water. By whatever in fact, there was hardly any censorship on what you get into Gaza, except for weapons, of course. And so they got everything they needed. They had a lot of concrete, which they used not to build buildings. We knew that, but nobody thought what this could mean to build fortifications and metals and gasoline and fuel and whatever. Everything was 100% free, except for certain strategic things like weapons. And we believed that people were getting happier in Gaza, more satisfied, and that this is applying pressure to Hamas regime. So they are changing, at least they are deterred, but they're also changing. Mm-hmm. This, of course, was nonsense. The left wanted to do it just as a humanitarian thing and hope for better life for the Gazans. The right wing, Bibi and others, prime ministers and others, felt that this was a good idea to strengthen Hamas, that the center left never said it. But the right wing, sometimes some leaders said it, some politicians, including Bibi himself, said it, strengthening Hamas at the expense of the West Bank leadership, Abu Mazen and others, Fatah, because there will be competition. You split the Palestinian community down the middle, asunder, and this way there'll never be a Palestinian state. Now, these were two different approaches, but the result was the same. So that's number one. Number two, the military. The government we have today placed very heavy, the heaviest emphasis on security on the West Bank. Now, there is no question about it. Jewish settlers, Jewish people who live on the West Bank deserve protection. There is no question. Nobody wants them killed. However, this had to be done reasonably. Certainly, because there was tension on the West Bank, certain activities should have been banned completely. Banned. Mm-hmm. Other activities should be protected. Traveling on the roads, protected. Having all sorts of activities inside Palestinian towns and settlements was unnecessary, risky, and just not worth it. Right. Especially in order to do that, you had to take soldiers from the Gaza area in the south to the West Bank. And when the Hamas attack took place, there were not enough troops, and the troops there were lulled into thinking that nothing is happening. Right. And the last, but not least, on the side of when it comes to preparedness, to readiness, military, purely military. Look, in Israel, since I was a soldier, and I was a soldier in 1956, so for some time, Saturday is something that is almost sacred. Well, it is sacred in certain ways, but in terms of preparedness, almost sacred. You send people home to their families, and you leave only a skeleton military personnel. again, maybe more than skeleton when you have no choice. For example, before the 1973 Yom Kippur War, no soldiers were sent home before Yom Kippur because there was readiness. But this time there was no readiness. Furthermore, it was Shavuot, Pentecost. Pentecost is also, it's a Jewish family festival, very happy, very nice. So we have been sending our soldiers home in droves, and the front was left without enough troops.
Right.
And that's because we were lulled by Hamas very cleverly that nothing is going to happen because they are moderating or whatever they are. So you have the context, both the political and the analytical, the political and the military. So it was, I would say it was really some kind of a group thinking, huge group thinking that was in common for most Israeli analysts and historians. So that is amazing, but it can happen. The intelligence case, well, I started my career, it was never a career. I started my service as a tank unit commander officer. I ended as a lieutenant colonel, but that's not important. The point is I was a panzer man, a tank man. But the last 14 years of my reservist service were in the military intelligence after 1973. So in the military intelligence, I learned how people think, and I learned the danger of group thinking. And this is exactly what happened to us in 73 before I joined the military intelligence. And this is exactly what happened to us now. And the military establishments make similar mistakes throughout history. I just mentioned two cases, which of course everybody knows about. One is Pearl Harbor. How is it possible that the American military, a wonderful military, made such an amazing mistake? Well, it was because of group thinking. And the second case was Barbarossa. Before Hitler invaded the Soviet Union, Stalin was warned by a few wonderful sources that Hitler is planning it, but he poo-pooed it. And his military intelligence were not sure, so they didn't try to correct him. So the result was a German invasion, complete and total surprise to the Russian forces in June of 1941. So yes, there are many such cases. These things are happening all the time. It happened to us for the second time.
Yes. Stalin had a very well placed communist spy, I think, in Japan, who spilled the beans on Hitler's plans, and he still didn't believe him. But it's incredible the extent to which the whole state, including at every level, like you said, the political level, the military chiefs, and in a way the society just convinced themselves that you can place, in a certain sense, on a broader from a broader point of view, you can place the kind of the Palestinian problem in a box, put it to one side, and it'll just sort of stay there, and it'll be neither good nor bad, but we'll deal with it at some later date, and not necessarily right now.
I'll just say that we were ready. Israel basically was ready to open the box, and we opened it to a large extent already. When you allow every day 17,000 Palestinian Gazan men to cross the border into Israel, go all over the country, I apologize, to go all over the country, maybe mainly in the south, around Gaza, to the kibbutzim, to the moshavim, to the cities, Sderot, Ofakim, they were everywhere. Don't you realize you are allowing 17,000 spies into your territory? And they report back to Hamas, because if they don't, they'll kill their families. So they have to. Every question they're asked, they have to provide an answer. And they can photograph anything they want, and they can watch anything they sort of see around. The answer is, how couldn't we understand that? The answer is, we didn't.
Let's turn to the situation right now. As I said, the main ground offensive doesn't seem to have happened yet. As I said, we're recording on the 29th of October, but there have been more limited incursions here and there, some raids. What do you think explains the delay, if it is one? I mean, it has been 3 weeks, although again, historically, when we think back to historical examples, the July crisis lasted the entire month of July in 1914. So these things sometimes do take time. But why do you think the kind of main thrust hasn't happened yet? And if I could tack on another question to that is, do you think Israel ultimately does need to go in full force? And if so, for how long? With which objectives in mind? Kind of give us your thoughts on sort of the policy here.
Well, the initial delay was the result of American pressures, and understandable, justified. Mm-hmm. The Americans needed to get their bases in Syria and Iraq, and they have many bases, that in any case came under fire from pro-Iranian Shi'i militias in Iraq. Mm-hmm. So they needed time to prepare, because after all, Hezbollah and the militias, the Shi'i pro-Iranian militias, threatened that if Israel goes into a land incursion, they will join the fray. So the Americans needed time to prepare their own bases. They were not prepared for it. And that was legitimate and even necessary, no question about it. The further delay came because, it's funny, but Hezbollah, sorry, my mistake. Hamas and Qatar very cleverly managed to convince us that if we delay somewhat our land incursion, there is a chance of achieving a swap of prisoners. Mm-hmm. In our case, prisoners, in what they have, are, of course, kidnapped children, women, elderly, right. Toddlers, babies. Point is that we really wanted to check it. So there was no rush. There was no reason for a rush, because we needed to give it a chance. Now we realize it was just a trick. They were trying to delay our incursion. Mm-hmm. So there were a few people in Israel, serious people, who said, hey, wait a minute, we shouldn't really go into Gaza at all. Mm-hmm. But I don't think this played an important role. So the result now is this. I'm sorry. We are beginning to invade Gaza on the ground. However, and this is very important, the way we do it is not one big incursion, one big raid, mm-hmm. as we did a few years ago. And the reason is that we paid very dearly for it. They are ready for it. They are waiting for us. We know we are stepping into a trap. Right. Everybody knows it. So the question is, how do you prepare before you do that? Mm-hmm. So we reached the conclusion that we need a much heavier aerial bombardment, much heavier, a lot of bombs that can go and destroy much of their tunnels underground, city, so to say. Right. And we have to do it bit by bit rather than one big thrust. Right. And the reason is that our commanders reached the conclusion that this will cost us much less in terms of casualties. In the meantime, it looks as if we are not doing anything, but I know that we are, but as in a small way, in small, much more diffused little invasions. Now, as I told you, I'm an old tank person, right? And this is not what Israel has ever done. This is new tactics. If you want, it's almost strategy. In 1956, we invaded Egypt like a knife going in, a hot knife going in butter, like this.
Mm-hmm.
In 1967, like a red hot knife going into butter, like that. Not now. Not now.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a new tactics, and the idea is to limit the casualties. We already have 2 casualties,
Right.
Not killed, but seriously wounded. So we have to be careful. We know our tanks are vulnerable to anti-tank missiles, whatever missiles. They have many missiles,
Right. RPGs and
RPGs, but and Coronet as well.
Yeah.
We know that we are vulnerable, even though I must say this, I'm still studying armored cores around the world, including Russia, not China, Russia and the West.
Mm-hmm.
And I can say, as far as I understand, and I was inside one and saw how it works, our tanks are probably among the very best in the world.
Mm-hmm.
The best protected, without any doubt. The best protected against anti-tank fire. And yet we already had some casualties, not many. Mm-hmm. So we know that we are not immune. And yes, the cost we shall pay for getting into Gaza will be high, and we would like to reduce it as much as possible. So that's the reason why what you see is still limited. I hope we are preparing for them certain surprises, but I cannot say more than that. Right,
sure. Now, let me kind of broaden the discussion here in terms of going beyond Gaza, because you're in fact an expert on Hezbollah, and that's the other big player here. So far, they have only been kind of putting up a symbolic contribution, certainly much less than what they could, in fact, contribute to the situation here. What's your understanding of the role they've played so far, or the role they haven't played so far?
The most amazing part of it is that they were taken by complete surprise.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely complete surprise. They knew every detail. We also did more or less, but they knew better about Hamas preparations for an operation like that.
Mm-hmm.
They knew because they trained Hamas.
Mm-hmm.
The Iranians also trained Hamas. They and the Iranians provided Hamas not only with weapons, but also with technology and advice. So they knew everything. The only thing they didn't know was the timing.
Mm-hmm.
So when Hamas did what they did, this atrocity, they were absolutely taken by surprise.
Right.
So now the question is, what did they do? Well, they didn't do anything.
Right.
For a few days, they did nothing. And to this very evening, this is, I think, 21 days after the Hamas atrocity, Hassan Nasrallah, the illustrious leader of Hezbollah, hasn't spoken even once on TV. Now, you have to realize that Hassan Nasrallah is a television junkie.
Mm-hmm.
For him to avoid TV performances is like withdrawal from opium,
mm-hmm.
no less.
All right, so there has to be a good reason.
It's painful. It's no less than painful,
mm-hmm.
because he loves himself on TV. And by the way, he's a very good-looking man,
mm-hmm.
and he's very, very eloquent. His literary Arabic is wonderful. He makes no grammatical mistakes whatsoever. And I checked, I was waiting for a grammatical mistake to tell somebody to say that he made a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
That was a mistake, because he made no mistakes. He's very charismatic, and his people love, watching him, listening to him. they are becoming ecstatic.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he reminds me that respect, really, he does, of, on the one hand, Adolf Hitler, and on the other hand, Winston Churchill.
Mm-hmm.
Stalin was not so good. But these two guys, the devil and the redeemer, Winston Churchill, they were like that. And he's like that. That for not appearing for 21 days on TV, fully fledged, his wonderful face, his amama, his turban, and everything wonderful, is causing him physical pain. And he hasn't done it.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is that he doesn't know what to do. And why is he so tormented is very simple. On April 9 last, he was visited by two of the most important leaders of both Hamas from Gaza, though this guy was not in Gaza, he was in Qatar and Turkey, but he's a very important leader of Hamas, number two, and number two also of Islamic Jihad,
mm-hmm.
that also is operating from Gaza.
Right.
And he was sitting with them. Nobody knows what they were saying to each other, except for, we are looking for ways to destroy Israel, to liberate Palestine, to liberate Jerusalem, and so. But there was no commitment there.
Mm-hmm.
But a day later, Hezbollah published a communique, announced that in case of war, they will join the fray.
Mm-hmm.
They'll jump into it.
Yeah.
And they were certain that also the Palestinians on the West Bank and others, the Iraqi militias, pro-Iranian Shi'i militias, will do the same.
Mm-hmm.
So it will be a multi-front attack on Israel. That was a commitment.
Mm-hmm.
Public. This was crazy. Why did they do it? Because Hassan Nasrallah, I think, lost his composure. He lost his restraint. He felt at that moment that A, he was almost omnipotent, B, that he needed badly public support in the Islamic world and in Lebanon too. Because let's face it, the Lebanese don't like us. Most Lebanese don't like us at all. So if you make threats against Israel, most Lebanese say, well, it's not a bad idea, But nobody expected it to happen on the 7th of October. No way. So now he's committed. So he's sitting in his underground shelter, bunker, and he's thinking, what should I do? What should I do? If I join the fray, he says, they officially said, we shall join the fray. Not him, but his deputies said, we shall join the fray if Israel is invading Gaza on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so he has to think. He is thinking, what should I do? If I join the fray, as my deputies promised, and as we all promised a few months ago, then the danger is that Israel will destroy no less than half of Lebanon, the whole Shi'i parts of Lebanon, which includes the south. They'll level the south, and they'll level about 2/5, about, say 20-30%, maybe, no more, 35-40% of Beirut, where we are at large. In other words, they'll damage the whole of Lebanon and destroy completely the Shi'i parts of Lebanon, the Baqa in the east and so on. In Lebanon, I'm speaking now as if I am Nasrallah.
Right.
In Lebanon, I'm already in danger. I'm already in trouble because last year there were general elections and I lost the majority in parliament, which I had. My party, Hezbollah, and other parties, the coalition. We had 72 parliament members out of 128, I think, and we were a majority. Small majority, but good enough, stable. We lost it. Now we have no majority. The other side, the opposition to Hezbollah, they don't have a majority either. But the system is paralyzed.
Mm-hmm.
My fear is that if I show no benefit to Lebanon, if I show people that I'm an Iranian stooge, and as many say anyway, and that I'm no longer beneficial to Lebanon, they might say, okay, so now you have to give us all your weapons. You have to understand, there is from 2006, there is a United Nations Security Council resolution 1701, which says that every militia has to give up its weapons. All the militias did, 90% of the weapons. Hezbollah gave nothing and even became more heavily armed since 2006. And the only justification for that is they say, look, Israel is such a dangerous enemy. They would like to conquer us again, conquer people, horrible people. So the army is not strong enough, the state army, not enough. We are really the strongest power, and we are needed in order to protect Lebanon. But now everybody, so, okay, let's say, okay, you can keep your weapons. But now everybody says in Lebanon, everybody who is not a supporter of Hezbollah, of course, everybody is saying, wait a minute, Israel is not such a dangerous enemy. A few months ago, you gave your blessing to an agreement signed by our government and the Israeli government of a maritime border. So Israel even gave up a small part of their part, which they claimed was theirs, to us. They gave it to us, gave it up. So Israel is not. Why are you saying that Israel is so dangerous? They gave up some territory for us in the sea somewhere far in the Mediterranean.
The gas, yeah.
Still, they agreed. So you recognize that they are not dangerous at all. In fact, they only want to be left alone and live in peace. So are you now going to attack Israel? Why? Are you crazy? Now, hey, we love the Palestinians. They are our brothers. But we are not going to commit suicide in order to help the Palestinians who made this kind of crazy raid into Israel with all the atrocities. They don't mention it, but everybody knows what happened. Mm-hmm. So Hezbollah knows that if they invade, and as a result, Lebanon will be destroyed, they will actually have to live from that moment on their bayonets. And I'm sure you know that Napoleon Bonaparte said once that you can do a lot of things with bayonets, but you cannot sit on them. Mm-hmm. And they will have to sit on their bayonets. Until now, they didn't need to do that. Yeah. Very uncomfortable, very bad. They can do it. Very, very uncomfortable. And they don't want it. So this is why the chances are they won't go full-fledged into the war if we invade Lebanon, invade Gaza deeper. However, if they don't do that, if they sit on their hands, which I give it 51% chance, yes. The 49% is because they feel still that they made a promise, they made a commitment. Their honor, the respect people feel for them in the Islamic world, which many do, depends on them being as good as they were, as their word, which is not the case if you don't go into battle to save Hamas. So that's why Hassan Nasrallah has been sitting for the last 21 days in his bunker and thinking, on the horns of a dilemma, and thinking, what shall I do? What shall I do? Yeah. What should I do? Iran is calling him to tell him, Mr. Nasrallah, he's not an Ayatollah, by the way, he's only Hujjatul Islam, which is a very low rank. But anyway, he's a political leader of significance.
Right.
So the Iranians are calling him and telling to him, Mr. Nasrallah, listen, we like you a lot, you are our man, it's great. But we are not pushing you to go into this fully fledged. Not really. We didn't know about the whole thing either. Iraqi militia leaders, commanders, pro-Iranian Shi'i militia, are talking to him and saying, well, we shall do what you will do. If you jump into the fray, we shall do the same. But they very gently imply, as I understand it, very gently imply, you don't really have to do that. You know? You don't have to. If you do it, we should join you. And the Iranians...
But you first.
Pardon?
But you first.
Yeah, you first.
Yeah.
We shall perhaps wait a little and see what happens. But on principle, we shall join you. Okay.
Right,
But again, don't forget, Israel is not bordering on Iran or on Iraq. Israel is bordering on Syria and on Lebanon. So they'll have to do it from Syria or from Syria and Lebanon. In Syria, you have a president whose name is Bashar Assad, and he too is not very keen on Hezbollah and the Iraqi militias on his soil fighting Israel, because he knows that if he allows that, there will be no Damascus. It's the same thing like Beirut. It's the same thing like the Shi'i villages on the Israeli-Lebanese border. So he is now in a state of survival. That's not a good idea for him either. And he was also totally surprised by the Hamas, incursion into Israel on the 7th of October. So neither the Iraqi militias nor Assad nor Iran are deeply interested in or pushing Hezbollah to join the fray.
Mm-hmm.
But the only person who can make that decision, and this time it will be his decision, not the Iranians. If he decides to join, it will be his decision. And he knows that it may be very bad. We're not sure. Israel will suffer. I can tell you, in 2006, Hezbollah were able to lob at us about 100 rockets every day. Today, they can do it for about 6 weeks, not 100, but 1,500 per day. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you which is going to be their main target. My city,
where
Haifa.
You live, yeah.
Haifa is a good target, wonderful. Not only because we are sort of about 500,000 people here, Haifa and close environs, but also because in Haifa you have chemical industry, the chemical industry of Israel. And if he manages to hit some of our toxic tankers or whatever they are,
reservoir,
that could be a true massacre. I mean, that could be, and he knows it. So the temptation is tremendous. He knows he can do Israel an amazing damage. There's no question about it. Iron Dome can do only that much. Right. And it won't be, after 2 or 3 days, we shall run out of stocks anyway. So, yes, he knows that. But he also knows, or he has to know, I hope he knows, that the damage to Lebanon will be far, far greater. So this is his dilemma. I know people would say to me, oh, Dr. Baram, Professor Baram, you said that he's not likely to do it. He won't do it. He won't join the fray. And he did. So I'm saying, yes, I'm saying that 51% he won't. But I'm saying that 49% he will. And the only thing I would ask myself, and if I am him, now I had a good childhood, a happy childhood. I had a few dogs. I hope I'm a balanced person. I have never been a national leader. I've been in my field, working, doing my job, but I've never thought myself to be some kind of a demigod. Never. And I don't think even now that I'm a demigod. So had I been sitting in his bunker, I would say to him, Mr. Nasrallah, I don't think it's a good idea. Just sit on your hands. Your reputation will suffer some. Yes. But you'll survive it. And all the Lebanese will be grateful to you for having not, thrusted them into this kind of horrible thing. and you can manage, and you'll find a coalition later. You'll find somebody that will be a president in Lebanon, your man, and so on. You'll manage, despite everything. If you join in, maybe you will be finished.
Yeah.
So don't do it. But he already feels like he is, perhaps he feels that he is the most important leader in the Islamic world. More important even than Khamenei, the Rahabar, the great leader of Iran. Because people look at him and say, look at this guy. He is so much more eloquent and charismatic than the Rahabar in Tehran, the great leader in Tehran. So much more. And he also fought Israel. He's fighting Israel now. Low key, but he is. So he might think that he's becoming like omniscient, omnipotent. It's a big problem. And I can tell you this, look, it happened to a few people in history. It never ended well. Saddam Hussein, why did he decide to invade Kuwait? Because he felt that he was omnipotent and omniscient. He felt like he was, I studied him. He felt that he was demigod. A friend of mine, Iraqi, said to me, after he invaded Kuwait, was kicked back and so on, he said, you know that I was in Iraq during Saddam's era, years before, but he said, we spoke amongst ourselves, and we felt that when he's going to the mosque, he's praying, all right, he's really praying, but he's praying to himself. He thinks that he's God. And I think this was more or less true. You can say about the same about Joseph Stalin in 1941. You can say it about many people. You can say it about Putin today and in Ukraine. Why did he invade Ukraine? Why? Because he felt that he was a demigod. He could do anything he wanted. I hope that Nasrallah, because I love Haifa the way it is, and I hope that Nasrallah understands that this is not a good idea, and that he's the man I think I know, at least I believe I know, that and I know him to be rational and calculating and very careful of what he did.
Right.
And that's his dilemma. And I wish I knew what was his mental state now, but I don't. He's in the bunker.
Yeah. But it does seem as though, like you said, he's caught on the horns of a dilemma. But so far, he's preferred to be cautious. There was a window of opportunity, right, in the first couple of days when Israel.
No, there was no window of opportunity because he was not ready to start the war. Had he known, he would have done it. He would have taken the risk. But to take the risk today makes no sense at all.
Right.
Because we have now half our army is in the north, half our army is in the south, and the Air Force is operating in Gaza at about 15%, 15% to its capacity.
All right, and there are 2 American aircraft carriers in the region. So.
And he has two American carrier battle groups that, by the way, neither Biden nor any other American politician or commander committed themselves very clearly to attacking Hezbollah if Hezbollah attacks Israel.
Right.
They only said something about Iran, which is a bit vague as well. But they are there. He has to think about the possibility, to consider the possibility that they might jump to the fray too. So it makes no sense, no military sense whatsoever. But the question is it still the same Nasrallah I know, or has he changed?
Right. That's very interesting. Let me ask you, let me turn now a little bit to what happens once this particular sort of episode eventually subsides. There will be at some point a day after, whenever that comes. Let me ask you kind of what are your thoughts on the political end game? There are military operations ongoing at the moment. Let's say Israel is in fact successful with relatively limited casualties for the IDF and also for civilians in Gaza, to the extent that can be achieved, in actually eradicating most, if not all, of the Hamas infrastructure, killing a lot of their fighters, etc. let's say that all goes according to plan, or as well as these things can go, right? What comes after that? Is it plausible to think that the Palestinian Authority, which is already very weak in the West Bank, could kind of be imported into Gaza? Could there be some kind of international, sort of multinational force? Could the UN play a role in kind of stabilizing Gaza? What happens after when this ends?
Here is what I see as the right goal of the war. And if we manage to do that, that will be a success. Mm-hmm. You can say a victory. Either we catch the leadership and kill them. I don't want them in prison. I want them dead. Mm-hmm. It doesn't sound good, but that's the way I look at it. Get them and kill them on the spot. If that is not possible, Israel can certainly live with the leadership leaving Gaza. So they might do it anyway because they have tunnels leading from Gaza into the Egyptian territory, into Rafah, in the Sinai, Egyptian territory. They can do it. We do know that they did it that their families did it already. Their families are in Egypt, not in Gaza. They are in Gaza. The commanders are in Gaza. So if they just evacuate, go to Gaza, that will be less of a success, but we can live with that. And Turkey can give them shelter, Qatar can give them shelter. Okay. They'll be living very comfortably. I can tell you more. I can tell you that much more comfortably than most people we know. And Gaza is placed under some kind of an international force. But this international force will be in the same situation as James Bond. Namely, they'll have a license to kill, which the UN force in southern Lebanon doesn't. So when Hezbollah tell them get out of here, they go out, they leave. Yep. They are not allowed to shoot. They will be allowed a license to kill if they are being shot at. Their lives are in danger. This force will have to stay there for a year, 2 or 3. Maybe not more, but certainly a year, 2 or 3. Israel should eliminate, if we manage to conquer the place properly, we must eliminate the whole administration that exists now. The whole administration. I'll explain why. The Hamas administration.
Right.
People say, the Gaza people are innocent civilians and you shouldn't hurt them. And I would put it differently. They are not innocent. They are pro-Hamas. They rejoiced when Hamas commandos raped Israeli girls, raped Israeli children, shot them in the head, and they rejoiced. They rejoiced when they brought into Gaza toddlers, Israeli toddlers and babies. They rejoiced. So, I knew it all the time. It was nothing. That was not new to me. They just couldn't do anything, but they would laugh. But very simply, they would laugh. They would like to see all of us dead. I never had any doubt about that, except I thought they wouldn't do it. It doesn't pay off. Mm-hmm. I didn't know it. I suspected it, but I speak to people from Gaza, and they're saying this to me. What do you mean? Most people, maybe not 100%, but most people here hate you so intensely, they like to see you all dead. And that's what Hamas promised in his charter and so on. So I cannot see them as innocent. Unfortunately, they are not innocent at all. However, they are not combatants. That's the point. Mm-hmm. So the Geneva 1946 rules of war, or international rules of war, are saying very clearly, you don't kill non-combatants if you can help it. You make every reasonable effort not to kill people who are not combatants. That's making a lot of sense. In other words, The international law does not allow Israel, and Israel will not, do in Gaza what the British did in Dresden, or in Berlin, or in Tokyo, or in Hiroshima, or in Nagasaki. International law will not allow that, and Israel will not do that. The point is that if you replace the Gaza military leadership now, the Hamas and Islamic Jihad, with international force, you also have to replace the administration, because the civil administration is Hamas 100%. So you have to kick them out. You don't have to kill them, just kick them out, no salary, go work somewhere. And a new administration has to be put in. Who? First of all, not them. It could be Gazans, it could be people from the West Bank, under the military protection and control of an international force. Who would? My problem is that I ask myself, and that's a big question: who is crazy enough to send American soldiers, British soldiers, French soldiers, Lithuanian soldiers, I don't know, to Polish soldiers to such a place? Who the heck? And my answer is, well, they should. If the West is so sympathetic towards the Gaza people, which many people are, okay, they should also be ready for this kind of risk-taking. But this is the only way, because right away, the Palestinian Authority from the West Bank, whoever will be the leader in the future, they cannot do it. They don't have the power to do it, as you said.
Right.
They have no. They have no willpower. They have no force to do that. So it had to be international. Next phase would be in a year, 2 or 3, probably not more than that. But yes, next phase will be, or right away during this period, rebuilding Gaza with international support, of course. Really rebuilding the place and providing jobs, creating jobs, and turning Gaza into something much, much better than it used to be, even before we are destroying it now. So that can be done by an international ruler, international governor of Gaza, UN governor or French governor, whatever.
Like a mandate, almost.
Like a mandate. It will be absolutely a mandate, but a mandate that really will work in two directions. A, to rebuild the economy and develop it much further, and B, to develop a local leadership that can take over. This will include people from the West Bank, of course. So then you'll have a reasonable Gaza Strip, at least for the foreseeable future. What will be further down the road, I cannot say. All I can say is that it seems to me that we are coming right now to the question of a Palestinian state.
Yeah.
Palestinian, independent, sovereign state. Now, half, more or less, according to the recent public polls here in Israel, about 50% of the Israelis, more or less, will say never, never, ever. Especially now, it's even going to go higher, maybe 60%. We saw what the Palestinians think about us. We saw what they would like to do us, to rape all our girls, to kill them all, to kill our babies. Thank you. Thank you very much. No, there will be no Palestinians. Until the 7th of October, those were 50%. Now, maybe more. 50% or a little less now of Israelis say yes. I, by the way, belong to them, but I can change my mind. But right now, I haven't yet. Say yes, we can live with a Palestinian state, neighboring state, yes. But when you say that a Palestinian state living side by side with Israel, we have to understand what we are saying. We are saying a state that cannot harm Israel whatsoever, in any way whatsoever. That's what I am saying. So I'm the principle of Palestinians said, be my guests, under one condition. security arrangements, not agreements, it's worth nothing. You sign with them, they tear it. Arafat, swallowed the paper he signed. So the whole thing is useless. No, there have to be practical arrangements on the ground that they cannot arm themselves under any circumstance. They'll be completely disarmed, including the places still on the West Bank where lots of young men have rifles and machine guns and detonating charges and so on. But it has to go down to zero or near zero, even there. Certainly in Gaza. If we don't reach that level, then I would say Israel cannot accept any solution, and there will never be a Palestinian state. But under those circumstances, yes. Now,
but on what territory?
Okay, I would say certainly Gaza. Certainly Gaza. The border is still there. It's a political and security. We have to expand the security, but not the political. On the West Bank, look, you have so many settlements, nobody can uproot the settlements. I'll change, I'll put it for you. About 85% of the settlements are confirmed and approved by the Israeli government in an orderly way. I never thought it was a good idea, but it doesn't matter. It's happening. It happened. I accepted it because it was my government, democratically elected, and they decided. I don't like it, but that's the way it is. Those settlements cannot be uprooted under any circumstance. They cannot. Nobody can uproot them. But you have about 15%, more or less, of illegal settlements, illegal as defined by the Israeli government itself. Those should be kicked out right away because they are illegal, even by the Israeli government's decisions. Seen, defined, and are illegal. The area that will remain, and that's most of the area of the West Bank, should be part of the Palestinian state. But again, this state has to be 100% disarmed. And there has to be some kind of control. If they get weapons, somebody has to take it away from them. And the security situation has to be 100% monitored and guaranteed. Under such circumstances, I see it as possible. I know 50% of the Israelis disagree, but about 50% still think this is a possibility. Now, how soon can it happen? I don't know. It can happen in 10 years, in 15 years. It can happen in 5 years, theoretically. But maybe that's too early. But you have to prepare for it. You have also to change. They will have to change their education system. Because in every Palestinian, the West Bank, Gaza school, they teach little kids that killing Jews is a good thing. This has to change from the very roots. Otherwise, forget it. I will never agree to Palestinian state. Now, in our schools, I have no problem that they will have supervisors visiting our schools. That we shall say, hey, wait a minute, this is an agreement to stay. You cannot say any longer in school. You can say it if you go in the street and talk to your girlfriend, but you cannot say it in school. The teacher, that we are going to reoccupy the West Bank and kick out all the Palestinians all the Arabs from there. That will not be allowed either. But we don't say that. I mean, but maybe somewhere they do, which I don't know of. But what I know of, people don't say it. Teachers don't say it. So they will have to change so much. And the media, you will not be able to have a television station that says kill the Israelis, kill the Jews. Even kill the settlers. You cannot allow that. In other words, they'll have to take charge themselves and prevent those things. We have to watch our people too. And so, yes.
Including members of the government.
Exactly.
Of the current government.
Well, Israel will have to rethink the whole thing. Now, I'm not saying that I know it will happen this way in Israel, or that it can happen on the Palestinian Arab side. I cannot say for sure. I can only say that could be the right direction to move in. And who knows, as a result of the atrocities that Hamas did to the Jewish kibbutzim, moshavim, cities around Gaza, maybe many Israelis will from now will say, listen, there is no way that we're going to give them independence. We should always keep them as occupied people, military occupation forever. Some of us say let's officially annex Gaza, annex the West Bank, turn them into a part of Israel, and that's it. My argument against this is that these guys are forgetting that there are between 3 and 4 million Arab Palestinians living in those areas. What will you do with them? I mean,
this was the original problem from the beginning.
Say it again.
This was the problem from the very beginning, right?
Yes, and you have to think what you do with it. So, look, people on the right wing are saying, and this may happen, I'm not saying it cannot happen under any circumstances. Look, military occupation for the time being, okay, no annexation for the time being, okay. But on the West Bank, Gaza, nobody wants Gaza. I'll put it very simply. Even the right wingers in Israel don't have any support. They say, let's stay in Gaza. Let's stay in Gaza. No Israeli in his right mind wants to stay in Gaza. You know that during the peace agreement during the era of peace negotiation with Anwar Sadat in Egypt, we offered him Gaza. And he said, do you think I'm out of my mind? So, yes, some people say yes, but they are tiny minority. The vast majority will never accept it. Right. But not even keeping Gaza under military rule. I don't know, 90% of Israelis, 99%, 95% would say, we don't want to rule Gaza because we can't. Somebody has to do it. West Bank, we have been ruling since 1967. And the problem here is, so what do we do with it? And if people say we shall never allow a Palestinian state, it means that military rule will have to continue endlessly. I see it as an option only. Yes, it's an option. But only if everything else fails. If we realize the Palestinians are not changing their approach. If we realize the international community is not helping us change their approach. On the West Bank, that a good Jew is a dead Jew. That's a terrible approach. And many of them, maybe most of them, still think along these lines. So if there's no change, it will be like, look, I'll put it this way. At the end of World War II, the Allies were sitting in Germany, okay? What did they do with the Nazis? First of all, the whole Nazi elite, the real elite, was eliminated. The Nuremberg trials and so on and so forth, where Hitler was dead. Then they used some administration that worked also for the Nazis. But they stayed there for a large number of years in Germany, in military occupation. The Russians on the one side and the Allies on the other, the Western Allies on the other. And they made sure very carefully, very meticulously, that the Nazis are dead when it comes to politics. No Nazis in politics. They forbade Nazi propaganda, Nazi slogans in the street, everything. And they admitted, and the German government admitted the Holocaust, the horrendous German crimes.
Right. They created space for a new generation to grow up with other different values.
They did one more thing. They did, of course, the huge, support, economic support that came from America mostly, but the Marshall Plan. So a combination of making space, creating space for a new generation to come in to take over, forbidding Nazi propaganda, Nazi whatever, and the Marshall Plan created New Germany. This is what happened in New Germany. What happened in Japan. In Japan, acted in a different way, but the Japanese, the Hirohito was not Hitler. He was not Hitler. He was a traditional governor whom the military pushed aside. So very wisely, MacArthur kept the Hirohito so as not to offend the Japanese people. But the whole thing behind it was built from anew.
Yes.
And the Japanese didn't suffer the same economic disaster as the Germans. So they didn't need a lot of support. And they managed extremely well. And look at Japan today. Yeah. So it worked very well. There is one other problem which we didn't have, the Allies didn't have with Germany or with Japan, but we have with the Palestinians. That's the fact that many, many Muslims in the world Islam, world Muslims, not necessarily not only in the West Bank and Gaza, in the world, are hugely supportive of radical Islam. Many. I cannot say how many. But many. And when you see 100, the second time, by the way, in the last couple of weeks, 100,000 people marching in London in support of Hamas. These they are Nazi rapists and murderers and butchers. And when 100,000 Londoners are from Britain marching in support of Hamas, it would be like 100 British marching in London in support of Adolf Hitler. And it means that the Nazis in Germany would have support in London. And we feel that the Hamas Nazis are having support in London and in Paris, in Europe, let alone in Ankara and Istanbul, in Turkey, and in Cairo. So, wait a minute. We have this huge problem of so many world Muslims, Arab Muslims, non-Arab Muslims, Turkish Muslims, supporting the worst murderers in Middle East history. Right. And the chances of success in such a case are lower than the Americans, the British, and the French had after World War II, because nobody supported the Nazis. No one. Even the Italians didn't support Mussolini. They hanged him. The Italians hanged their own Mussolini. The Soviets were not, Stalin was not a very nice guy. I wouldn't like to meet him in a dark alley under any circumstances. But Stalin was a sworn enemy of the Nazis. Nobody supported them, except for the king of Britain who had abdicated. He was a Nazi supporter. But the British people were not. And so it was easier because the Japanese were isolated. The Chinese hated the Japanese. The South Koreans or the Koreans hated the Japanese. The Japanese were absolutely secluded, surrounded by very hostile nations whom they damaged a lot. The Nazis were hated by the Poles and by the Ukrainians, maybe not most of them, but many, by the Russians, every one of them, by Eastern Europeans, by Western Europeans, the French. They were completely isolated. And so it was much easier to change Germany and Japan into something else, which is today definitely something else.
Right.
We will not have the same advantage.
Right.
So we should need a lot of international support, a lot of it.
Right. But perhaps the example you give, Professor Baram, of the Japanese specifically is so interesting, because when you look at Japan today and its kind of pacifist culture, maybe that's starting to change a little bit because of China, but it shows that cultures can change, right? So because we're coming towards the end of our time, I want to try and maybe find a silver lining, if we can, amidst all the death and destruction, because wars do change societies. the 1973 war is a good example of that, right? To some extent, it created the conditions for peace with Egypt, which were not there before. Is it possible that the level of destruction that the Gazan population will experience will convince even them, even those who, like you said, maybe some of them, secretly or not so secretly, kind of rejoiced at what happened on October 7th. Is it possible that even in among those groups there will be a kind of a change in mentality, and people will think, what, the Hamas has led us astray in a certain sense, right? The promise that we can finally liberate Palestine or whatever is an illusion. Is nothing other than that, and we have paid dearly for it, very dearly for it. And the only solution is not a military one, but it's precisely changing ourselves too, right? Accepting, not trying to rewind history, but accepting, where we are, and trying to find a different path. And also in Israel, maybe this war will convince at least parts of the electorate that peace will be difficult, and like you said, there will have to be very stringent conditions. But to some extent, it's worth trying again to find a solution, because the alternative of kind of convincing ourselves that this can go on more or less forever turned out on October 7th to be a dangerous illusion. So is there the possibility that the war will kind of create new political space to again breathe fresh life into this conflict, which has been going on for the better part of a century?
Yes. I may surprise you. I think yes. But it can happen only on one condition: huge international support for not something surreal, like vague, like peace, for fighting against this kind of Islamist Nazism. It's Islamist Nazism. It's nothing short of that. Fighting it tooth and nail. The international community, the West. Okay, forget about Russia. I don't have any expectations from Putin. Mm-hmm. And I don't have any expectation from China. Zero. Absolute zero. But Japan, America, Europe, the whole of Europe, including what used to be Eastern Europe, much of Africa, non-Islamic Africa, I would expect from them huge support for this kind of reconciliation, but total fight against this kind of Islamo-Nazism. For example, I'll just give you two examples. The president of Turkey said the other day that Hamas are freedom fighters. This cannot be tolerated. Right. If the West cannot convince Erdogan to change his mind, or at least to change his language, then nothing is going to work. If they don't find a way of forcing Qatar to stop completely 100% of its support for Hamas, then we will have achieved nothing. So yes, both support for peace, but peace in itself means nothing if you are not fighting the Islamo-Nazis. Now, absolutely no, not every Muslim is a Nazi. Absolutely not. I can give you a number of organizations, of people, of countries that are Islamic, but far from being Nazi. But Hamas is Nazi, and Hezbollah is Nazi. They are Islamo-Nazis. And applying every possible pressure on Iran to change its approach. If nobody does anything about it, and I'm not sure what they will do, France, Britain is with us, but France is not.
Mhm.
Just an example. So if we don't find a way of doing that, then I don't see any chance for anything. And then you will eventually have between the Israelis and the Palestinian Arabs, possibly also Israel and Syria, possibly also Israel and Lebanon, hopefully not Israel and Egypt, most likely between Israel and Iraq, even more likely Israel and Iran. You'll have very serious developments. And I cannot go into details, there is no reason for that, but I can see very serious reasons. So to avoid a catastrophe that is awaiting us, in my view, the whole West, I consider Japan, for example, as part of the West. Mm. The whole West has to mobilize and realize that this is very serious. And I think the beginning of it, we can see the beginning of it already in Washington, D.C. There is a reason why President Biden came here. There is a reason why he made his speech in D.C. There is a reason why he's sending two carrier battle groups to the Western, Eastern Mediterranean. So politicians and analysts in the world begin to see something happening here, and I think it's a good thing. So it can be a silver lining, even more than a silver lining. It can be the beginning of a new era of moving towards coexistence and peace. But very heavy Western involvement on every step here, including fighting, physically fighting. I mean, if not kinetically, then certainly economically. But I'd say in the case of Iran, it could be kinetic. Islam or Nazism, and creating a new reality. Then I'm telling you, the Israeli public is very, very attentive to what's happening in the world, in the West especially, and to the reality on the ground. So the Israeli electorate most time behaved in a reasonable fashion. We are not, I mean, some people are less rational, but most of us are very rational. So yes, there is more, there may be even more than a silver lining, but it requires what I said. Otherwise, we are going nowhere. In fact, we are going towards disaster. That's my view.
Yeah, indeed. Well, Professor Baram, this has been fascinating and very enjoyable to talk to you. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but I hope we can maybe reconnect in a couple of months or so and see where we've ended up.
It will be a pleasure.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, David.